My name is Christopher and I have HSV2 down here, and disclaimer, this is not medical advice. If you want less information, talk to a doctor. Okay, this is how to have sex with herpes. Not physically with herpes, because that's like a virus. Like, how do you have sex? You get the point. How to have sex now that you have herpes, or now that your partner has herpes. And I'm gonna first say this. Safe sex doesn't actually exist. Condoms don't prevent transmission of HSV or HPV all of the time. Not everyone has symptoms, and HSV or HPV could be passed by a small chance without symptoms being there. Same with up here. So with that being said, safe sex doesn't exist as a human being. With that also being said, no human is necessarily at a 0% risk of anything when it comes to kissing or sexual contact. Most people are just oblivious to it and kind of live in like a wishy-washy world of not thinking about there being a risk, but that's not because there isn't, it's just because it's not on your mind. Personally for me, never thought about the risk of getting herpes until after I got it. With that out of the way, a lot of people think that if you just touch someone with herpes, you get it. No. When it comes down to things, I'll give you a couple facts. I can give somebody herpes while wearing a condom, and I could have sex with you never wearing a condom and not necessarily pass it on to you. Now, don't take those words out of context, but those are two examples there. You don't just automatically pass it without protection. Transmission rate is relatively low to begin with, without any precautions, but those are things to keep in mind. Now, precautions you can take when it comes to you being positive or your partner being positive is use protection. It can certainly help decrease the risk of transmission. And for me, I use antivirals daily. I use valacyclovir, 500 milligrams to decrease my risk of transmission. This is through decreasing the amount that the virus sheds asymptomatically. Now, to go more into the shedding is where the virus becomes active on your skin, whether it's up here for cold sores or whether it's down there for HSV1 or HSV2. The virus is going to shed a certain amount of time. I'll include some good links down below that explain the percentage of the time that viruses shed. It typically decreases over time, but it's important to kind of have these numbers just to have a good idea of what to expect. So there is no risk of transmission on the days when you're not shedding or the time periods when you're not shedding. However, you have no idea when you're shedding, so you kind of have to assume that there's a small risk all the time. Now, when you're shedding the virus, it doesn't mean automatic transmission. It just means there's a risk, a small chance. So to be safe, you always have to assume there's a small risk. And for those who don't have herpes right now, that risk still applies when you sleep with someone else, whether or not they disclose to you and whether or not they know their status. The three things you can do as an HSV positive person is no outbreak, antivirals daily if you want, but not necessary. Talk to your doctor about taking medication in general, and then use protection. Transmission rate is going to be extremely low with all three of those, but no transmission rate will ever be zero on an average basis. And that's a hard thing to accept for me, because I think that's the biggest thing that bothers me is once you contract either oral herpes or genital herpes, your transmission rate on average is never going to be zero ever again. But this should not detract you from having a sex life. Live your life, because when you really look into it, herpes is not necessarily a sexual boogeyman. It's something that happens as a result of being a sexually active adult. And if sex is part of being human, then herpes is part of being human. Hope that helps. If you have any more questions, leave me a comment. Extra help is going to be in the description box. Love you, miss you. Hope you're doing well. See you guys later.